Alrighty, hey everybody. So today we're just doing a quick retrospective on Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's had sort of a rocky launch period. It went from one of the most controversial games in history, I'd say, to something I actually quite enjoy now. So let's get straight into it. Sort of a quick summary, and then we'll go straight into the scores. So if you want to summarize it.
Yeah, so it's essentially obviously I guess everyone that's probably listening to this has probably played it or seen it or know exactly what it is, but it's basically like a shooting game rather than, an adventure game or an action game or anything like that. There is a bit of a base campaign to it, again, in the style of like a shooting game, really. We're going to review it based on, I guess, some of the multiplayer stuff, more so than the story and the campaign. And we're going to, I guess, review it from the perspective of Star Wars fans rather than gamers, I think. Would you say so?
Yeah, that does tend to be what we do, sort of at the end of our videos, anyways. Is sort of pose the question like, is this good for sort of the fans already? And that's sort of the angle we want to get on this is the game good for fans, rather than is it sort of the greatest shooter of all time? Because yeah,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah, I think in this case, might as well sort of get that general part out of the way. I think it is pretty damn good for the fans. It has characters from
Agreed.
the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. It has planets from all three as well. It sort of caters to everybody, but not in such a sense that it sort of takes away from it. Like it's a good medium for that. So you can have, it doesn't really matter that you have, Darth Maul fighting Rey or something. Like it doesn't really matter. It just works. It just works well. Um,
Well, I
and I
think
like,
that's also fitting into it, and what one of the good things of this game is those kinds of some of those fantasy, you know, like things that we wanted to have, which is what would happen if Darth Maul ever had to go up against Rey, for example. Like that's what games are great for. Like if you buy a boxing game, like sometimes you want to know what would happen if Muhammad Ali ever had a fight with Mike Tyson, two people from two different, completely different eras. Now you can see it. Like that's kind of what it's for. And on that front, like there's a first slight drawback that I had, which is I think the characters are great. I wanted more. The reason being is that I wanted to play more because I enjoy the game. And but the only thing is, like, if you sit down for an hour or two, like, to play it, like, it's kind of all you can do because after that, you're like, well, I've kind of played the characters a little bit. It would have been nice if there was like a Mace Windu, for example, as an extra, or whatever. Like, and I get the main characters from the movies, but yeah, like, yeah, I guess one of the drawbacks is I wish there was more because it was good. I wanted more of it.
yeah, I think it's sort of obvious that the game is. I mean, as with all Battlefronts, really, it's sort of catered to that online audience, which is fine. But I think they also sort of packaged it with a story mode, kind of, which I guess
Mm-hmm.
leads you to expect that the story mode actually exists and isn't kind of just like, I don't know. It doesn't really exist. That's the problem. You can't really just sit down and play it like by yourself or
Well,
with
I
a
tried.
couple of
I,
people
I,
there.
I tried and I got bored of it. It was it
Yeah,
was it
it
was
just
not.
doesn't. It's not there.
Um, yeah, there was one. Okay, like not. It wasn't even great. There was one bit with like Luke where you control Luke instead of the other character that they've kind of invented for this story, and that was okay. You kind of get to see those. It was like the last appearance that Luke made before getting destroyed by the Force Awakens and the Last Jedi, basically.
Yeah,
Um, but even that, like, it wasn't as good as what it could be. You're this all powerful Luke post, you know, post the fall of the Empire, and yet you can't really explore that enough, to be honest. So, yeah, like the campaign was there, and it probably doesn't deserve much, to be honest. So we won't really be talking about that. We'll be talking about, I guess, um, you know, how did it feel? Did we enjoy it? Like, does it do service to the fans and a few other factors. So, well, let's get straight into scores. We'll start with graphics. Do you have a score in mind for what you would give in the graphics overall? Because I think it was a beautiful game.
yeah. So I think the graphics were just a straight up nine. Like they're pretty much fantastic. Like they're spot on. They're really really good for Star Wars. Um,
On
there's
the
not
most
much I
part,
can say
yeah,
about it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree on the most part. I've given it a 9 also. It's not the only reason. There's a few reasons why it's not a 10. There's a couple of drawbacks in a couple of faces of the characters, and I don't know if that was. I can't imagine it being this, but I don't know if it was a licensing issue. But like Luke's face was not really Mark Hamill's face, to be honest. Like almost, but not quite. But like Darth Maul, Darth Vader, the Emperor, like looks spot on. Count Dooku was pretty good as well. The glow of the lightsabers, the movement, the backgrounds, the shine of some of the things that were there was good. So yeah, generally speaking, yeah, I think a 9 is a solid effort too.
Yeah, I definitely can't disagree with that. I think sort of seeing the um, like especially the prequel characters for me, like characters like General Grievous, Dooku, um, just in that sort of graphic form in game, just looks fantastic. It really does look good. Um,
Well, these are
but
these are also
let's
characters that have never really had many appearances in games
yeah,
too, if you are like really. So it was nice to see them, I guess, get that. And for me, with arcade mode, like I really enjoyed being Dooku. Like really enjoyed it. So
yeah,
yeah,
and
all
I
right,
played Grievous and Maul the most, so yeah, I definitely it's good to see them represented as well. Yeah.
agreed. All right, gameplay. What do you reckon?
I reckon this was an 8. I reckon gameplay is absolutely fantastic as well. Obviously, without sort of a good story mode or whatever to sort of pull you in, the only thing that would make it, that facilitates this gameplay is obviously the online mode, which again is what it was made for. But we didn't really play much online. But yeah, I personally
Yeah.
think the gameplay is still really good.
Yep, agreed. So gameplay for me, I've scored it a 7. So not dissimilar to yours. I thought it was pretty strong. I've played it quite a bit online as well, and I guess you could probably still call me a bit of a noob playing online. Most of what I did was dying, and also shout out to the guy who was paired up with me in Heroes versus Villains in a duel, and realized very quickly that I was not very good on my first day of playing. And one time when I died, he knew he was 2 against 1, and he just jumped off a cliff and killed himself too. So shout out to you, making me feel great. Which, by the
Legend.
way, and I know this is a community that we're generally in, but the gaming community genuinely is a pretty toxic community, and it's not toxic in the reason that some of those feminists back in the day called it out for, but it is toxic in the sense that people think that because they're good at games, that means they're good in real life. Like, they shit talking games and they think that's real life. But yeah, that everyone has to start online somewhere. And unfortunately, where I started was not very strong at that time. But yeah, shout out to that guy. You know who you are.
Legend. Um, but yep. I guess we've gone to story. We sort of touched on it a little bit, but there isn't one. There basically isn't one. The game fully facilitates online play, so the story is kind of non-existent, and that it kind of sucks in my opinion. I'm a big fan of sort of single player stories, and this I think would have benefited greatly from a proper story, but it just doesn't have one.
Yeah, agreed. So I've given it a 3. Because again, I tried to play it, and there is sort of like a token attempt, if to be honest. There is a bit of something where they try and build a little bit with this new character, Iden Versio, who is like what would you call it, like a death squad, like leader or whatever in the for the Empire, and she starts to question the Empire during, I think it's Operation Cinder, which is the Emperor's operation if the Empire was to fall, is basically to go out and destroy everything to do with the Empire so that it can't be used or whatever. So there is a little bit of one, like her father's an admiral in there too, and there's but again, it wasn't good enough to compel me to finish it all the way. I got bored and stopped doing it afterwards and went back to online and arcade play.
Yeah, it just doesn't really exist, the story mode, unfortunately.
Yep. But officially, I've given it a 3. I think you have as well.
Yeah, 3 is exactly what I've given it because it is there. Like it's not non-existent, but it's practically non-existent.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then like world atmosphere, which I guess really would tie in more to a story. If it was purely based on a story, I'd probably give that a 4. Slightly better, but like as in they've introduced some characters like Lando Calrissian and Princess Leia and whatnot, but really it's still pretty weak. But if you base it on, I guess, the world being the maps that you use and the settings that you're in and how it looks and feels, what would you score it?
Um, yeah, so I'd give the atmosphere kind of a 5, mainly because it's not bad. Like again, it is sort of tied into the story, but um, it's not, it doesn't have the story there to back it up. It's kind of just Star Wars maps and whatnot. And I mean, we sort of had a talk about it whilst we were playing, but on sort of like the Tatooine Mos Eisley map, you can end up going into like the cantina and into like the hangar bay where the Millennium Falcon was, and it's like there is enough substance there even without a story that I can't really give it below a baseline, but it's still not quite like it's not really there. What about you?
Yeah, like it looks beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, look, I think it looks beautiful, but again, it's not alive in the same way, you know. Um, like you're sort of there in Mos Eisley for this map, and obviously Mos Eisley would be this bustling place, or with low life and scum and villainy, and yet there's no one else there.
yeah, it's
It just,
literally
and
just you
again,
and
like,
writing. Yeah.
yeah, which I guess I know. Again, I know why it's there, but it would have just been cool. Like, do you ever remember like Midtown Madness games where you were driving around like Paris and Washington and whatnot, and there was like, there were people like on the side of the street, and you could never actually hit them because it was a kids game, but like they were technically there, right? It'd kind of been cool if you'd have just had a few people like that, where maybe you'd have some people cowering behind their shops, their market stalls or something, or you could see in the bar like there was a bartender that was like hiding beneath the bar or something. Do you know what I mean? Like just a
Yeah.
couple of things like that would have brought it more alive. But and I guess it's not easy to do, and it's probably asking for a lot. But yeah, because of that, like I've given it a 5, which is basically exactly on what you would expect, but that you know nothing that really shouts out at you.
Yeah, agreed. So the next
Soundtrack.
one is
Um,
soundtrack, which yeah, I think is a pretty solid 7. I think it has sort of the some of the classic sort of or remixed ones from the Star Wars movies, so you can't really go wrong there. It's sort of it's not exactly what you'd expect because again, it's like they could have done something different, but they didn't. So I'm happy with the soundtrack. What about you?
yeah, yeah, I've scored it an 8. It gets slightly higher from me because obviously it's already a really good soundtrack, being Star Wars soundtrack. One of the things that I quite like about it is, like when you like died and you respawn as whoever, you kind of each character has their own little like theme music, obviously throughout the movies too, and they definitely utilize that. So like when you get back into the fight as like Darth Vader, you get the Imperial March. And as Darth Maul, for example, was Duel of the Fates, and it adds to it. It kind of makes it kind of cool, almost like a boxer coming down the ramp to his music, or a wrestler in WWE or whatever coming down to their entrance music. It's kind of cool. It's like a calling card. And look, part of that score is based on the fact that the soundtrack's already been written for him through, courtesy of the movies. But yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yep, I definitely agree on that one. It's kind of hard to mess up a Star Wars soundtrack. It's sort of already been set in stone what to expect.
Yeah,
Unless they really went off the beaten track with that one, they wouldn't have gotten such a high score. But yep.
yeah,
So the next one is sort of overall immersion, I guess. So how immersed are you in the
yeah.
game when you're playing it?
Mm.
Um,
And I've given. I'll just pull the band-aid off on this one. I've given that one a 2. I don't score that highly because there's not really anything to be immersed in, if you ask me. The reason why I didn't get a 0 is because there is still some good banter. There's a few lines of dialogue that the characters kind of play off each other when you're in the arcade mode. So, for example, if you and I were on the same team, and say I was Anakin and you were Obi-Wan, there would be like a little bit of cross banter where like Obi-Wan, I think, has like a line where it's like you were supposed to report back to Coruscant or whatever, and there's like a bit of banter, which adds to it. But there's like 3 of those, and then it goes back to repeating. So it takes me out of it again. And also, one of the good things where you can have Darth Maul up against Rey, as we mentioned earlier, also is one of the things that takes you out of it again, because we know that this would not have happened. So for me, I think a 2 is actually a fair call for that one. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think I agree somewhat in that, like, they obviously put a little bit of effort into a few of them, like characters who may have actually fought. You've got your Obi-Wan, your General Grievous, your Anakin, the characters who may have actually had a fight, like even Darth Vader and the Emperor had a couple together. Um, like if you're on the same team or if you're on an enemy team, but it's not quite enough to really like ground you in the world. Like again, without a story as well, there's no reason to believe any of it's happening other than just because it's kind of an arcade game. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I again, like the atmosphere for the previous score on atmosphere is where like the sort of map came into it and got to at least carry it a little bit. But in this, there really isn't much to go off of. So yeah, I think I'd give it a 4.
Okay, yeah, because I think you were mentioning before you might have thought about a 7, but
Yeah, like that was
maybe
mainly
you
sort of
hadn't considered
combining the
like
two.
quite everything.
Yeah,
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 yeah. Look, I can't. If you had given it a 7, like, I was actually interested to hear your reasons for it. But look, I think this is not a game where immersion actually is a thing. So
it doesn't matter.
it's
Yeah, it
almost
doesn't
unfair
actually
to have
matter.
it for this
Yeah,
game.
yeah,
But as I said, like where it still saves itself is some of those dialogues, and also um, yeah, this might not be immersion as much as gameplay, but look, when I'm going as Vader and I'm going up against, even if it's not up against another lightsaber user, like if it's up against like the rebel troops or whatever on the Death Star, and they're all shooting at me, and I'm just like ripping through them by blocking all their shots and then using force choke and stuff. That it does make me feel like, yeah, okay, I am Darth Vader. So that is immersive. But where it kind of, as I said, it falls short is that it's obviously just an arcade game, and it's very clear. So there's like brief moments where you might have some immersion, but ultimately you're not really. That's when what I came with my score.
yeah. And I think I sort of agreed with that. Again, like I was considering giving it a higher score, just sort of combining the world atmosphere. Like my argument was going to be that sort of the world atmosphere combined with some of those sort of unique dialogue lines would have given it a higher score. But I sort of gave the map to world atmosphere, so I can't really justify a higher score over just the voice lines in overall
Yeah,
immersion. So
yeah.
again, it
Okay.
doesn't. It sort of doesn't.
Um, all right. So one of our, intangible options is the wow factor of this game. The wow factor. To the extent that it kind of makes you go wow. Like, what would you give that? It's a really, again, I've said this every time, but it's a really hard one to actually explain what really that wow factor means. It's that unexplainable feeling that you get, I guess. It's a bit related to world atmosphere. It's a bit related to overall immersion. It's a bit related to graphics. It's a bit related to it all. But what's your like wow factor for it?
My wow factor is an 8. I'm quite happy with the game, to be honest.
Mm,
Again, I'll get into sort of reasoning to why in the Met expectations category as well. But the game is sort of it had a lot of bad press. It was one of the most controversial games of this generation of all time, and it's still a really really good Star Wars game. It's exactly what you kind of want when you're playing it. Even some of the duels, like especially when we were sort of versing each other. I was Obi-Wan. You were um, who are you playing? You're
the
playing
count.
Dooku, the Count.
Dooku.
Yeah. Um, and it just sort of feels good. Like it's not really something you can just go, oh yeah, like the combat's good, because sometimes it can be a little bit clunky too. But it just feels good to get into like a proper lightsaber duel as two like named characters from the series. Um,
Well,
with
that one in
clones and whatnot
particular was
fighting around you.
was pretty awesome, because I think we had one in particular that really got me, and we were on um what's it called? I always forget. It's where the clones were made, and I always forget what the name of the planet was, annoyingly. But we were there, and you were Obi-Wan, and I was Count Dooku. So I had droids, and you had clones, like on your side,
Yeah,
right? And we were obviously doing like head to head or whatever, and there's this like idea that there's a few different ways that you can win because it's about kill count rather than one on one you beating me, for example. It's about the team as well.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of like really good like chases that we had on with each other, and it genuinely at times did genuinely feel like this is something that could have been put into the movie at some point. Camino, sorry, Camino is
Camino.
the name.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, like it's it genuinely felt like it, and that I remember that that battle was one of the favorite battles that we've had on games in general, and we've played a lot of games where we've had battles against each other or with each other, and I genuinely enjoyed that one more than most, and I think it was purely based on like little things like when you knew you were low on health. And so you were like, right, well, I'm not going to win in a straight up duel with the other one. So I'm going to go for his team, which are a bit easier to take out. And then you go around a corner and, oh my God, there's a lightsaber running towards you. Shit, like I'm going to
Yeah.
die. I'm going to die. It was really, really good. Well, I think we've got to remember. So, and it was DICE as well involved in this. So it's
Yeah.
based off the Battlefield model, which I think Frostbite system as well,
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong. And so it's very Battlefront, but in the Star Wars world. So that's really where you got to come to it from. And so if I compare the wow factor of this versus the wow factor of like Battlefield games, and I've had a couple of Battlefield games over the years and enjoyed them immensely. I would say that this one probably has a slightly higher wow factor, to be honest. I've given mine a 7 on my score, and the reason being is that I knew going into I didn't get this game until 2019. I deliberately avoided it because I didn't want to be put into this situation of being essentially at the behest of EA. So I deliberately avoided it, and I came to it, as I said, it's just a few months ago, really. And basically, like I'd played the original games back in the day, long time ago, and enjoyed them to a certain extent. But yeah, I came to it here, and again, this is about met expectations, and we'll get into it more. But wow factor, it didn't like wow me in a sense that it was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. But it wowed me in a sense that it was actually more like better looking, more enjoyable. My my other half and her son also really enjoyed playing it with me, and that's actually quite a rare thing to have where the three of us can all enjoy a game. There's not many of those around, so I think I have to give it a better score than what I want, because I don't think this is an amazing game, but I think it's a perfectly fun, enjoyable arcade game that is designed not to be played alone. Whether you're playing online or with friends in your house, doesn't matter. Don't play it alone.
Yeah, that's completely fair. You can't really just sit and play it. It's definitely, I mean, you can, but it's definitely more aimed for, yeah, like a sort of shared experience. And
Yeah.
just for the final part of our scoring, I just want to get onto like the sort of expectations part.
Yep.
Um, this is probably the biggest part for me on this game specifically because my expectations were pretty much in the bin. There was just so
Yes.
much bad press over the years. Like I know that Dice was sort of trying pretty hard to um, bring it back with sort of adding a lot of the prequel content. Over the years they've added like more planets, more content, etc. Just to sort of bring the game back because they have the funding to do it. But they obviously the launch was terrible. The loot box system, like everything that happened with it, obviously no point going into it. It's very much documented on YouTube. If anybody hasn't heard of it, can easily go and look through. So my expectations were really pretty far in the bin. But yeah, having played it, I definitely think it met and exceeded my expectations. And I gave that score a 7 because yeah, I definitely
Mm.
expected worse and got much more than I wanted.
Yeah, agreed. I also scored this one a 7, where basically it's comfortably exceeded my expectations. Um, but it wasn't the best thing since sliced bread, but it definitely exceeded what I was going into it thinking. Yeah, as you know, with me, I'm not like a massive shooting, first person shooter or shooting arcade game kind of guy. I'm not a massive Call of Duty guy. I'm not a massive like Battlefield. I enjoy, as I said, I've enjoyed immensely. But I'm again preferred the campaigns generally with those. If it's not Halo or like GoldenEye N64, I'm not generally a lover of it. But I would happily give this one a 7. It was better than what I thought it would be. The graphics were much better. Some of the features were much better, but it wasn't like setting the world on fire, basically.
Yeah, it's not like the perfect game, but it's definitely, again, I think the expectations category was the most interesting one for me to look at because, again, yeah, I
Yeah,
expected very, very little after all I'd heard, but I definitely think DICE have done a good job at just sort of getting their heads down and just continuing to work on the game. And that's always good to see, I
agreed.
think. So, yeah.
Yeah. So by my calculations, that makes my overall score for this game a 6. So definitely something that's better than you think, and definitely worth a play. But also not a full price worthy game, and that's lucky because I got it when it was not full price, and that's one of the reasons that tipped me into getting it.
Yep, and I think mine ends up pretty much the same, a 6 overall. And again, I think that pretty much fairly equates the game. It has a lot of its own issues, but it's a really, really fun game if you're sort of just looking for Star Wars content, or if you're looking for online content, because again, it's very much catered towards that. And I think if we sort of had the time to just sit down and learn all the mechanics and play it online, it would be a lot more fun than sort of the average shooter. Just simply because of the mechanics of becoming these heroes or villains as well.
Yeah, well, the drawback of online, I should have added, is that you earn extra points and abilities, and like protection to your health, etc. The more you play, so naturally, when you first start out, not only are you figuring out how to play it in general online, but you're also got a much weaker character for that as well. So that is actually one of the things that you've got almost you have to go through the process of being killed loads and having people go and kill themselves rather than carry on playing the game on your team, to get there. And it's a little bit of a drawback, I think. I sort of feel like there should be a fairly even playing field, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think if we answer the question again, is this a game for fans or for new fans or what? I think it's a game that is going to be very good for fans in the sense that you finally get to be, Count Dooku or Darth Vader and genuinely feel powerful. But I think that it's still generally geared towards semi fans rather than actual proper fans.
Yeah, I think it sort of caters to all, to all fans. It sort of caters to the original trilogy fans, the prequel fans, and the sequel fans, which I think obviously means that being sort of a little bit more of a wider net doesn't necessarily mean it pleases each individual fan base perfectly. And I think that's probably the best way I can summarize it is that, if you like all of Star Wars, then this is definitely for you. If you like the prequels the most, then you'll get some enjoyment out of playing the prequel characters, but maybe not so much out of the other characters. And that's just kind of how this game is set up to be.
Yeah, exactly. And a 6 pretty much means what it is, which is it's not terrible. Go play it if you haven't and you're thinking about it. But don't break the bank or your back to go and do so.
Yep. And with that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll get back to you with possibly some more Star Wars content in the future.
See you next time.